controlled my slides from my phone, which is so freaking cool. Anyhow, design and development of enterprise apps. So by a show of hands, how many people here do app development work, hobbyist or professionally? Okay, that's a lot of people. That's awesome. So a lot of people generally develop apps, and the way we do this is we develop apps for consumer products. So one example would be Fitbit. So Fitbit's like a watch, a thingy, you put it on your arm, it tracks your movement and so on. And then the next step is that you can record. It records a lot of that, and that gets used up. And your cloud, you log in and you find your information. That's a very straightforward example of example of what you would consider a consumer product. So anyone can build an app for it that can, Fitbit actually has an open API, so you can build more things on it. Enterprise apps are a different idea. Enterprise software, what does that make you think of when you first hear that word? Clunky, old, poorly designed, all of those. Yes, it's true. So recently there's been more interest in this, and I want to talk about later on particular one huge event that's triggered a lot more thinking. So people are now actually seriously considering doing enterprise design better. And for several reasons. One of them is Donald Norman's book called Emotional Design. He wrote the book, and in the book he talked about the idea that people use a product more that's designed better. And they actually did a study where they compared two products. One of the apps actually had less features, but people rated this highly as compared to the other one simply because it was designed better. So design does play a big role, and that's fairly evident from Norman's book. And so we'll talk a little bit more about why this change is occurring. And so this is a quote by a company. Infor is a enterprise software company that designs a lot of really good-looking software. And their CEO, Charles Phillip, talked about, this is one of the quotes he gave that, and basically the idea behind there is a lot of people, especially the new generation, are not going to give a crap about the old software that doesn't work well. We're designed to be consumer-centric. So the products we design, even if they're business products, it's a good idea to have them in a similar approach because the transition becomes easy. Well, the big thing is that enterprise users rely on that software to do their day-to-day job and to make their living. So making it easier for them obviously increases productivity and so on. Infor actually does this in a really interesting way. They basically sent 2 or 3 of their experts, and these guys sit in with the team they're designing for or the company they're designing for, and they just take notes. They're creepy, just basically writing everything someone else is doing, and you write notes on everything. What they're trying to capture is the workflow. See, the idea is, Infor has the idea that if you can capture workflow in words properly, then you can design intuitive interfaces that capture the same workflow. And once you have a workflow written, it's easy. I mean, you can do really, really well once you understand the basic of why these guys are doing. See, it's kind of the same idea in the tech or the methodology behind lean startup. You eliminate waste. In our workflows, we have unimaginable amount of waste that we accumulate, and there's really no good way of getting rid of it, which is fine. It works, we carry on with our lives. But if there is a way to do it better, why not do it? So the big event I talked about earlier was material design. This is a talk about Android, so it makes sense to talk about Android. Android L came out with a huge spec that Google released back when it was still Android L. What the full thing is, it was material design. And at the core of material design is something that Infor took to heart, which is this idea. That the changes to software, that any changes you need to make need to be centered on the workflow and the approach to the workflow, as opposed to just making software look good. That's not enough to just have a good-looking piece of software when it doesn't do the same kind of functionality. The problem with a lot of enterprise software is that not only is it old, but also the generation of people using it are very old. Now, that's not generally true, but in some extent that's true. And the problem is, and this is not necessarily a problem of old age or something, but the idea is they are not willing to change any habits. And I find that in younger students like us, give us one thing, it doesn't work, we'll change to another tomorrow. We're more flexible, and maybe that's just our mentality because we've had smartphones and so on. But generally, a lot of enterprise software and enterprise tools, they're not willing to do those kind of changes. But I feel like the quote I mentioned from Charles Phillips earlier, that will change a lot. And one of the core principles at heart is material design. Now, what I want you guys to understand out of this is this talk is not only pertinent to Android development. You can apply material design principles because it's a spec. A spec can be used for anything. So you could be doing Ruby, you could be doing JavaScript, you could be doing Android, iOS. The principles still are the same that apply there. And so I'm going to walk you through 3 of the major ones that Android has, which I think make a lot of sense. Even just intuitively, they make a lot of sense. But there are, I'll try to provide some examples here and there where these things just fall apart so poorly. And it's not the developer's fault, really, because when you're designing something, you're more interested in how it works than how it looks. And then once you get that part down, then getting it to really work the way you want it to be, that's a little difficult. And those two don't always go hand in hand. And we'll try to see how material also makes an effort to make that happen. So the first is the idea that material is a metaphor. So what does that mean? Several things. One that I mentioned already, the material design can be used for a lot more than just designing Android apps. The next thing, and the kind of the core behind material, is the idea that screen space. So imagine you got a screen that's limited in size to the user, and their attention span obviously is limited. So the motion across the screen, how it happens as you interact with the application, that's one of the huge principles that material focuses on. It wants to eliminate all the flickering and the lag that happens in this process and making it smooth transitions. The idea is if the transitions are smoother slowly, and this happens, by the way, in code too. In written code, this is why if anyone of you has contributed to the Linux kernel project, they're like super strict about code formatting. Like, you have to run your code through that says it passes. If it doesn't pass, they'll just send your sample back. The idea is in design or in material and in Linux kernel, the core idea is same. If the structure looks the same, soon you start to forget the parentheses, the curly brackets, whatever starts the function, you start to see logic. Material design, the idea is the same. If you get used to the transitions, you kind of switch from just being mindful of it to go into a subconscious state where you can do the same motion again and again. That's the idea behind material as a metaphor. You basically train your own mind in the same kind of set of transitions that are going to cause, well, hopefully, that are going to lead to productive behavior. So now you're basically, imagine someone who's never seen these machines, a lot of our like tech and high-tech software being trained just starting with material design. Their idea on how an application should look, work, and feel would be like at least 50 years ahead of ours. And the reason is not because our software is primitive. The reason is just because they haven't been trained in the bad habits. And we're less willing to give those up. So that's really, sorry about that. And they're less willing to give those things up. And so that's the first part. And by the way, keep in mind, material and with the whole idea of gestures, transitions, and so on, also provide a new level of imagination and creativity. David, the gentleman who presented here last time, talked about web animations and so on. And basically the idea was kind of similar. Once you have a framework, a solid framework of working through these, you can do anything you want. And that's exactly what material does. Next one. This one is kind of a continuation of the reasoning that motion provides meaning. The idea is that objects are presented to a user without breaking their continuity. And you have to realize, in most front-end applications, this does not happen. Screen changes a lot, refreshes a lot. If you can avoid doing some of those things, please do. According to Google, it works. And pretty much anything Google says is probably fact. Again, you can for what it's worth, but generally, it makes intuitive sense too, right? So if you look at an application, the less changes you have to make of screen changes, refreshing, if you could do those in background or asynchronously, you're hopefully already leading to a better outcome because your application makes less changes. Again, the idea is to train your mind like a machine. So you don't have too many changes. Our brain detects differences. That's when it's alert. When you're doing the same thing, it doesn't really do anything. So the more you can minimize those, the more you can sort of automate that routine. So and another thing is that the motion that actually does happen in Android L, and they've gone through crazy lengths to make sure that this particular part happens. The motion is meaningful. Now, meaningful could be a million things, but if you really look at, it's unfortunate that a lot of the Android L stuff, like the real, like, a lot of material interface is not completely out yet, right? So we see a lot of the stuff happening, but it's not all out, so people are not very familiar with it. But a lot of the transitions they made, like, you click the like send a new email button in the Gmail app, and like 3 or 4 icons pop up with the most like contacted users. Seems pretty obvious, but they're ranked in the order of how many times you've emailed them. And they're kind of like small circles to basically click on. Again, a very simple example of where the small compose button expands into 4 smaller buttons, and each one of them correspond to something that later on will provide meaning. And again, that's the idea. Feedback is clear, and transitions are effective and convenient. That last part, transitions being effective and convenient, is again going back to the line of thought of making the whole thing consistent. The more you can do that, the more productivity you lead. This last part is actually perhaps even more universal. Excuse me. Android L does this very, very well, actually. The emphasis on what you can do needs to be bold, needs to be graphic. Graphic part is where transitions come in. And it's hard to believe sometimes people design applications that like where the main, like kind of the punchline of the application, if you will, is kind of hidden away. And so by the time the user is very excited to work on this application and take it on, and then they like, and Google calls it moment of inspiration. You see something and you relate to it, and then an action precedes that. This is the reason Amazon has their like one-click button right there to the other side of the screen. You find something, you relate to it, you have one of those moments of moment of inspiration. You click right there, they have a sale. That idea is the reason why if the Amazon button goes down for like, was it a few seconds, they lose I don't know how many thousands of dollars. And like they have, I mean, who knows how many mirrors they have, right? So back when Sun Microsystems was still a company, I don't know how many people still know that. Sun created these huge, I remember seeing them, they were like size of a truck, I mean, almost. And these were like duplicate storage devices. So these were disaster recovery storage devices. And Sun sold a few to Google, and the idea was that you would take all your data and make like who knows how many millions of copies of it and store it up for disaster recovery. My point being, the intentional, like making behavior intentional is not easy. It doesn't come to us naturally to make something intentional unless you look at it that way. But Material actually, fortunately, Material does this at some level automatically. So you don't have to be really sitting there and beating your head over, how am I going to make this more intuitive? Oh, let me just take a look at one of the apps that have already been built. Oh, okay, I see. I kind of get an idea of what's going on. The idea is that an emphasis on user action makes the core functionality being click a button, get them to convert to a subscriber email list, get them to buy something, any of those, it makes them apparent and really kind of like, I mean, you can't really like pop out of the screen and put like an arrow, like go here, dude, this is what I want you to click. I mean, but Material does this to a very good extent. So that was kind of the first part of this, which is designing enterprise apps. Now let's get to the development. So there was a huge survey done of about, I think, 10,000 developers earlier in 2014. Virgin Mobile and some other companies were involved in the idea. And I found out 1% of people are building, of most developers are building enterprise apps. But those 16% are earning like $5K per app per month or something. I mean, it is some ridiculous amount that they're making. And enterprise apps a lot of developers are not interested in enterprise apps for a few reasons. One of them is that they're just not sexy, at least not yet. Enterprise software, like I said, the first words that kind of came out of some people in the audience, boring and clunky. Nobody wants to develop that. Everyone wants to make the next Facebook, the next Gmail, or the next hot app. Those are all consumer products. You're not gonna reach to like, fame and all that from building enterprise software. But I guess the people who are building them are making enough. So this might be something you guys want to look into. The good thing about it, the real difference between enterprise apps and consumer is just levels of access. And I'll talk about them in a bit. But one of the major differences that separates enterprise and normal apps is what level of access do you give the users. Sometimes you don't want to give a lot of access to the users. Sometimes you probably will give a lot more. And there the idea comes from the MDM, which is mobile device managers. So Mobile device managers are different in iOS and Android, and I'll talk about what those differences are. But I think one of the big differences here, one of the big deals here, is that security matters a lot. So a lot of us write code, but like I don't know if you've ever Googled like how to write secure code, and there's a whole book, and you just look through the first 10 pages, and you close the book and you put it back on the shelf. And writing secure code and writing code are two very different things, and they're different for a reason because well, it's secure code, and so that's that's different. Anyway, the main iOS and Android MDM per se are actually. Let me ask a question. How many people here use Android phones? Awesome. So everybody knows what I'm talking about, or more or less everybody. So yeah, I mean, well, it makes sense because we're at Android meetup. Oh, I get it. Okay. Sorry, I just had a moment there. Anyway, so if you've used an Android device, Gmail or something, you realize that Android lets you make multiple profiles, right? So you can actually I have like 3 email addresses. 2 of them, now Gmail actually even lets you make like email addresses that are not like Gmail. You can use whatever. I use my Nightmail, I'll just sync them in the same app. So that idea actually not only extends to the profiles, but overall to the whole device architecture. Android MDM allows you to control, so to have multiple administrators give full root level access on any application that's enterprise MDM enabled. iOS doesn't. iOS can only have 1 user per se. This is helpful, but it's not always the best thing to do. Partially because when you end up in situations where you want to have different user groups or different work groups, if you go in and you want to have different levels of access, having multiple devices be on the same users, I guess you could still make it work in iOS, but developers so far have preferred that Android becomes a little easier. I've noticed a friend of mine, so myself and a friend of mine, we applied to the NSF for a grant, and they recently approved us for this. And basically what we're trying to build is the idea of using the Bitcoin blockchain as a service. Basically the Bitcoin blockchain provided as a cloud that private enterprises can use. So basically, you imagine you have 20 devices and 20 people each using the device. All of these devices kind of use the blockchain as a message queue and transition from one to another. I mean, this is a lot of probably jargon and mumbo jumbo. The idea at the root is that we can enable a very, very fine and granular control over what devices get what level of access and what can they transfer, simply because Android has these differing MDMs. So I think that itself is a huge deal. Next thing is core competencies for the OS. So I don't know if this is rumor or not, but apparently President Obama can't have an iOS because Apple's iOS is not secure enough or something. He gave a statement like that. I'm not sure if this is a rumor or actually a news thing. But anyway, so rumors aside, in reality, iOS, I'm not a Mac guy. I have Windows, which you guys saw because it got stuck. So, from what I've heard some of my iOS friends, it turns out that implementing a lot of very secure code is actually a little difficult from how iOS obscures it. I'm not too sure. The Android one I can speak on behalf of because I do know the stuff. Implementing a lot of security rules are easier, not just because it's Java and the workflow becomes a little easier to me because of used this language for who knows how long. The object-oriented models for implementing security, for how you would go from step 1, 2, 3 to 4, those seem a little more inherently working. And so that in itself, just sold me on Android. Well, before this presentation too, I just liked Android because it was Android. And Objective-C, doesn't Mac make you like go get $100 per year or something? If you have to, yeah, right? And Android, you have to only pay $25 to get a Play Store account and do that. That itself should be enough. Make Android apps. $25. I actually want to take the last maybe 5-ish minutes to talk about something. We've been working over this. So I mentioned earlier on, I'm a developer and a coach at Blackstone Launchpad. A lot of people here who come in and talk about are interested in app development. Some of you might be interested in entrepreneurship too. And the entrepreneurship, I don't mean go make a startup right now, but trying to take your ideas, your apps to the next level. So I see a lot of developers come in who really have like absolutely no experience in the entrepreneurship side of things. So what I did was I took a weekend, probably 20 some hours. I compiled a 3-month course. It's completely free. I don't want your email. I don't want you to log into Facebook and like the page. I don't give a damn. Go to that website. If you find it interesting, let me know. Basically, the website kind of goes day by day. It's like 3-month course that goes from day 1 through day X till 3 months are over. It's only like, it's supposed to be Monday through Friday, so day 1 through day 5. So I would love for you guys to check it out and tell me what you guys think of it. That is my contact information. You can find me there. I'll talk real quick briefly about this before I take questions. The idea there is it's split in 3 months. The first month is Paradigms in Technology, which introduces to what the hell's going on in tech, what's new in mobile, what's coming up on horizon. The next one is Paradigms in Leadership. That complements your developer abilities. These are a lot of articles on HBR talking about what makes a good leader and what can improve. The last one, which probably would be favorite for you guys, is Paradigms in Software Development. These are 10 of probably 50 papers that ACM put up on their some anniversary that just came up. But these 10 are absolutely incredible historical papers that have been very influential. So one of them includes Kent Beck's How to Teach OOP, which is probably one of the best papers on object orientation. It might help you fill gaps in your knowledge, or it might not. I would love if you guys gave me feedback. It doesn't matter, just write me an email or tweet me, the thing sucks, or it's great, or whatever. I mean, I would just love some feedback. Like I said, the course is completely free. You don't have to take it if you don't, but I would appreciate it. I titled aside pilot program because it's the first time I'm actually introducing it to people. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Any questions?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yes, no, maybe so.
All right.
The course is yours?
Sorry?
The course is yours?
Yes. I took about 22 hours, I think, over 2-3 days. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, dude, it's first half is basically a couple of, actually a lot of articles. And by the way, these are all articles. You don't have to buy a book, none of that crap. They're just articles, and the idea is they're written by some of the experts. So Benedict Evans, Ben Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, these are some of the really top-of-the-line experts who, if they say something will happen, it probably will happen. Pretty sure of that.
All right, that's it.
More questions? Thank you so much.
All right, so Reggie, while we have you set up.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian. You can just hold this if you want to.
Hey guys, I'm Ian Thomas. I think some of you guys saw me last time. I was going to ask you guys about Code for Orlando again. How many people here voted? Just voted? And surely more than this guy, right? 2 of you, 3? Come on, you just put like it's like that. You just voted at all. Have you ever voted? Oh. Sure, you care? You care about the government? Do you feel like you're making a difference? Did what you do matter? Anybody?
Yep.
No? You felt like you made a difference?
Try to.
A little bit? All right, awesome. So if you want to make a difference, at least in your local community, I can help you out. We're doing the Code for Orlando Open Data Day. So on the 31st, we're going to have a bunch of people, much like you guys, like me. We're going to meet up at Canvas downtown. If you RSVP, we'll give you some food. I was hoping there was going to be beer. There's no beer. You can buy beer. You can drink beer there. And it's on a Saturday. So there'll be people with all kinds of ideas, all kinds of different skills. There'll be artists, programmers, people with ideas that don't have any technical skills. All of those people are welcome. Just RSVP for Code for Orlando. And it's going to be awesome. We're going to do cool stuff. And I believe in April, we're going to have an even bigger one, which will be more of a hackathon. So more technical based. But this one is really open for anybody. So if you want to make a difference in the local community, without doing a whole lot of work, this is the way to do it. So if anybody has any questions, just feel free to talk to me. And again, that's Code for Orlando on meetup.com.
Yeah, I had a question about the
Yes.
for the code for. So generally, hackathons you go and they give you problems. Is this more open-ended so you can work on what you want, or is it?
More open-ended. Absolutely. So this is not a hackathon.
Thank God.
Yeah, so if you want to do that, power to you. We're really just looking for people to become educated. So there will be people making software there. There will be people taking big data and doing something cool with it, putting it on Google Maps, whatever. But really it's just an education thing. So we want people to become involved. We want the community to be aware that all of you exist. And also, the local government is becoming more open to it. I don't know if you know much about Buddy Dwyer, but he is open to tech, and we need to help him be more open to tech. And the way to do that is to do cool things and show the city that if they leverage us as a resource, we can help them out a lot, and we can fix things that they're just flat incapable of fixing. Like, who's ever been at a stoplight and went, this is an awesome experience, you know, like, I've been here for 10 minutes, this is just excellent. That's the kind of stuff we want to fix. We want to make that better, and we want to make it more accessible to get the information to make things better. And this is the first step. So the more people that show up, tell your friends, we can really actually make things better and probably make you feel a little bit better than when you went to vote and whatever you voted for didn't happen. So, but anybody else? Any other?
I'm a member of that group as well, and I saw it sort of seemed like it was going to be isolated meetups. Is there sort of plans to maybe do a longer term? You know, of maybe brainstorming something that as a group you can work towards.
Okay, excellent. So yes, I think when did you look at it? Was this like recently? Okay, so the holidays. That just everybody disappears for the holidays. So it is a monthly meetup. We do work on projects. There's an iOS app and an Android app in progress right now. You can check that out. You can help contribute, like today. So if you want information on that, come talk to me. So yeah, it's definitely, and I've been selling it as a resume builder. I'm sure everybody needs to build their resume. So if you want to do that, I can help you. But it's definitely structured. We have people that are involved, and the local government is actually involved with Code for Orlando directly. So we're not just off on a whim, just doing. This is all for purpose. So, is there anybody else? Any other questions? Yes. It's a Saturday, the last day of the month, and I mean, you guys aren't doing anything because everybody's gonna be prepping for the game, right? So.
Super Bowl. Come
yeah.
on, guys.
Come on, surely some of you guys. Pro's terrible. It's all right. I don't blame you guys for not watching.
I love my
So anybody else? Questions, concerns? You want to yell at me? You can do that too. No? All right. Here you go, man.
All right, cool.
Thank you, guys.
I'm from New England. So I'm born and raised Patriots.
So you dropped your little.
The little fluffy.
I don't need it. Come on.
All I care about is that live stream.
Oh, man. All right. So I really wish I would have went before Victrum, but that was great. I appreciate CloudSpace giving me the chance to talk here. So I'm going to talk about prototyping on Android. I know that a lot of that, everything that Victrum said is kind of going to go into my talk as well, which I was sitting there thinking, wow, everything he has and everything he's talking about material design is in here. But anyway, let's get started. I might have a little bit of issues here because the large monitor is playing havoc with my screen. But just like Victrum was talking about before, this is going to be a theory type of talk. There's not going to be a lot of code. There's not going to be a lot of spec documents or anything else like that. This is more of a talk to developers to try to get you guys to understand why we need to start prototyping for Android, why we need to start developing in a way where we're taking that initial step to look at what we're doing and then moving into build before just going in and building. And as developers, we kind of have that, I just want to jump in and do it. And you can't do that anymore. It just is not going to work. So a little bit about myself. My name is Reggie Ellis. I've lived in the Orlando area for about 6 years. When I first got here, started with a company down in downtown Orlando called Push. So I was their first developer and kind of built their team up. So I've gotten to work on some cool projects like T-Flats, Disney, anything else you guys have seen from them, Smoky Bones. Since then, I've transitioned to doing my own thing, freelancing here and there between design and development, both on the web, and I'm starting to move into iOS and Android programming. Oh, and before we go there, you guys should follow me, even though I don't really use Twitter for anything but ranting. And I do a little information gathering, and we should be GitHub buddies. I've kind of tore down everything from my GitHub and am starting fresh for the new year, putting up new projects and things like that with everything I've learned over the years, but give a shout out. So what is prototyping? And I'll kind of slow it down now. I wanted to get through some of those introductions. Prototyping is basically, everybody knows, we go ahead and we take these steps, we plan something out, and then we move forward. We vet it through certain channels to make sure that it's working, and we do it in the easiest possible way before we actually get to building it. It seems that the app world, especially the Android world, is just catching up to this kind of ideology, because if you look at any other industries, say like the movies, you have something called an animatic, something that they do before they build or shoot the actual movie. Something that's low key, very, in its case, low fidelity, that's done before they even shoot the movie, only because that saves on time, budget, and everything else. You look at, in the web industry, which is very close to what we do, where they'll go ahead, there's a new push to do that now, where you'll prototype, you'll do a mock-up, you'll pass that on, it'll be vetted through the client, be vetted through designers, developers, UX people, and then it'll be built. And as Vikram pointed out, there's been a big shift in the Android field, or the community, with the release of material design. It's more important than ever to start to look at prototyping. And these are some of the reasons why. We have motion, interaction, color, typography now being more important and now being spec'd out in the design document. Before, Android had a design document, but to be honest, it was terrible. It was really bad. And to some extent, they didn't even follow a lot of those design specs in their own apps that they released. I think with the new year, as we saw with L, switching over into Lollipop, they saw that people wanted, as Vikram said, nice looking apps, whether it be enterprise or whether it be on the consumer side, but they also wanted everything that worked in a certain way, or information that flowed in a certain way. So it wasn't just about design, it was also about how information flowed, how we interacted with things, how things appeared on screen. So look, feel, and also just that overall tactility of that process of the user getting from one page to another, or transitioning from one spot to another. And you guys have read the spec materials, right? You guys went over it, you guys know it, it's important. So prototyping helps us in design, right? So we all know, if you've ever worked on a web project before, if you worked even now on Android projects, you know that static mockups have been around forever. They get the foot in the door, and they used to be the go-to thing. They were normal, they were something that was presented in front of the client to give the client the idea, because sometimes they couldn't grasp those visual specs or what was going on that was being talked about. They don't work anymore, only because we have so many interactions, we have so many devices out there. When you design, usually you only get a design for one screen. You don't get it for multiple devices, which we know we all have in Android. So if we move down, that kind of is moved on to click-through demos. And I'm talking about on the web now, because a lot of this hasn't moved over to Android. So now we have products out there where you'll design certain screens, and we'll show the user flow, right? So you'll put it up, and it'll be the sign-in, and you'll click on it, and it'll shift over to, it won't even be a proper transition. It just shifts over to another screen, and then it'll show you've logged in, it'll show your dashboard, and then it'll shift over again, and then it will show the details of your profile. And this is great for showing user flow, but it never gives you the full experience or the full impact of what the app is going to be, or how it's going to actually work, right? And then now the trend, again, is starting to shift again, because we always have trends in internet and applications, is starting to shift to interactive prototypes. So now you're having more, you have higher fidelity, you have things that are interactive with, you can push a button, you can see the actual transition, the approximation of transitions that will be in the actual application. And this way, you can start to work out problems. Again, as developers, we tend to jump in, and we find out too late that, hey, this doesn't work, that we're presenting information in the wrong way, and by that time, it's probably too late, because it costs more as you're in development to correct something than it does if you plan it out first and then do it up front, all right? So the why, right? So we have a lot of developers in here, and everybody, there might be some that are sitting here, I'm a developer, why should I care about this? You know, I don't design, I don't open Photoshop, I don't do anything like this, I just get and I build. And some of you guys might prefer that. So what I've found, again, not in the Android side of things, but this does apply, is that in the web world, a lot of times you will have distinct silos of people. You have a designer, you have a front-end developer, and then you have a back-end developer. And these people usually handle their key roles, right? You have a designer, he'll design that product, he'll present it, they'll sit in meetings, they'll design it, they'll hand it to the front-end developer, he'll take that, he'll turn it into code, and he'll take care of doing all of the motions, the interactions, the transitions, how things are presented on screen. And then once that's done, they'll hand it off to the back-end developer where they'll build that, make it, you know, finish up that product and then put it out, right? And when app development, you usually don't have that separation, right? You have a designer and then you have a developer. So the developer is responsible for those transitions, those looks, those fills, and also working with the designer or the UX team member to get those right. So being a developer and learning how to prototype, learning even a little bit of color theory or anything else like that, again, you don't have to go completely, benefits you and getting, as I have down here, these bullet points, getting involved early. So getting in there, being in those design meetings, being in those client feedback meetings, of not having to, one, get surprised, because there's that waterfall method, right? The designer designs something, all of a sudden it gets kicked to you, and you're like, yeah, no, we can't design that. We can't develop that. We can't do it, you know? If you're in those meetings, you can catch that early, you can be a part of that review process, and you can be informed about that review process. You're not going there just sitting, and that can inform your back-end development. And that goes into better understanding. And switching back to, in the web world, right, we have a front-end developer, and that's usually his job, to figure out how this design is going to move, how it's going to be interacted with, things like that. But in the Android world, we don't have too many designers switching over to messing with view groups or views or fragments or anything else like that. It's not something they do. No, I mean, I don't know how many designers want to open up an XML file or a strings XML file or anything else like that. It's usually just not done. So you as the developer, if you know this, you can get in there, understand how the motion is going to work, how to deal with it, and not be surprised by anything that you're handed down to, and have to repeat what you're going to have to do later as far as code. Because once you get into code, again, it's probably going to be a pain to go backwards. And then you get quicker development iterations, right? So if we thought of the Android build as the last possible build, say you've done it, if you can have something in between as a developer to quickly build, even if you're not doing the design, but quickly build something, build your transitions, build your looks, your fills, your detail screens, things like that, even if it was a complete throwaway, as far as code-wise, this would help you as you moved into your development, because most of those problems would be solved either by yourself or somebody you can present it to, with the client, your team, your design team, anybody else that you may be working with. So we move on to, this should have been the how, actually. Mistake. So it's always hard to, with the industry moving forward, and this is a big push in the iOS community. They actually do a lot of app prototyping now. And this all extends all the way into Xcode itself. That's kind of where I got started with it. And it's actually a lot easier to do prototypes or view prototypes in Xcode, unfortunately, at this time, than it is to open up Android Studio and do the same thing. Again, just given the nature of how Android is broken down, how separated it is, it's very hard to not start writing code instead of pseudocode. So there's other tools out there, but again, the trend seems to be that they want to gear it towards designers. A lot of designers are saying this is our sandbox, or a lot of UX people are saying this is our sandbox. It's not necessarily true. We also have a lot of developers saying, I don't want to touch that. I'm a developer. I don't want to deal with that. For me, I've found a happy medium between having something that's really interactive, really quick, a place where I can write code as detailed as I want. So if I want a click-through demo where I want screens shifting from one area to another, kind of look and feel or touch and feel, really easy to do, can do that in 5 minutes. Or if I want to get really detailed where I'm calling in information from a server that might, an API hook that may already be set up to figure out those transitions, I can do that as well. So it fits both worlds for me as a developer / designer or whatever maybe you're just a developer. Oh, and I had to, sorry, technical difficulties. I had to throw this in. This was a quote that I was given from Caleb when I talked about giving this talk. JavaScript. You do know that Android apps are written in Java, not JavaScript. You learned that much, right? So again, there hasn't been, as much as I've tried to look into it, Android Studio is just, it doesn't handle, like I said, building these kind of prototypes well. So some of the tools I've kind of went to is Sketch and Framer Studio. How many people have heard of Sketch in here? How about Framer Studio? Or Framer.js, same thing. All right, you guys played with it, done anything with it? Okay. Sketch is a program, basically it's a vector program, handles bitmaps, things like that. It's very quick as far as designing prototypes or designing anything you want. It's not just meant for apps, but it is geared towards that, in my opinion, and also geared towards doing web design and development and iterating through that really fast. You also don't have to pay the Adobe tax, so that's nice. And then there's Framer Studio. Framer Studio came out out of Facebook. There was a group that actually Facebook bought, and I do not remember their name at the time. They developed some in-house tools. You guys have probably seen some of their work, right? The Facebook messaging app, things like that. All of that came from that. He eventually took his studio from Facebook and is now developing this on his own. So there's an open source version of this, and there's also the IDE, which I'll show you in a minute from the examples. But you can look all of that up. I'm not, again, this is more of a high level talk, so I'll show you the resource links out. I am blanking on the history right now as far as Framer goes.
It's still fairly new, right?
It is still fairly new. I think it's in version 1.2 something. But like I said, if you don't, the Framer Studio itself is about, now it's $80. Before they had some deals going on when they had first started before the 1.0 milestone, where it was like 50, but then they were giving discounts like 20%. That's when I picked it up. Again, you kind of weigh it against what Photoshop is. I think one app for Adobe is like $20 if you want to add on to that. If you get the entire creative suite, is $50 a month. So you can kind of weigh that in. And Sketch, I think they raised their prices well. They're about $80. So, but that's a one-time thing, right? Until major releases. Again, you don't have to deal with Adobe as a monthly cost. So I'll show you Sketch first. Now, again, I'm not going to go through the entirety of Sketch. There's a lot out there, a lot of information that doesn't need to be covered here. But you can see this is actually released by Google. This is there. All the material design assets. So this is great for you. If you're developing an app, you're not a designer, but you want to have that look and feel that Google provides, this is really easy to fire up, start dragging and dropping pieces in for your app, and get it going, get it working, and at least have that look and feel of an Android app, of how it's supposed to look. And these are, again, come straight from Google. They have it on. If you've read through the spec, they added these later. They have Photoshop versions as well, and Illustrator versions, if that's more your fancy. But they allow you to quickly go through, iterate, and create something like this. I did this for the talk itself. Sorry guys, I'm having rendering issues with the projector here. We'll just leave the guidelines up. But come on. Where are my guidelines? If you see it, shout it out. There we go. There we go. All right, so again, toolbar at the top, drag and drop from there. These are smart objects as well, so you update one, they update everywhere. Same thing with the bottom. I've went in here and I followed, you saw the guidelines that were up there. This follows the spec exactly and how it should look. But it's very easy to put this together. Again, if you're just a developer, you don't have a designer, you're trying to get an idea out in your head of how that information is gonna look. Something like this you can put together in less than an hour, you know, if you really detail about it, it's really quick. Same thing with your workflows. And everything, if you look on the side panel here, you'll see I have everything in DPs, right? These correspond to the blocks out on the outside. So you can also quickly develop little tools for yourself for spacing. So if you're not keen on the guidelines, which sometimes I'm not when I'm designing, I can go in here and drag these blocks out and resize them fairly easy to see how everything fits, how spatial, you know, as far as spaces between elements and everything matches exactly. So you can see how detailed you can get, as in if, hey, I don't ever want to touch design. I don't ever want to, I'm sorry, don't ever want to touch design, but I don't want to, I am having serious computer issues here. If I can get back to that. There we go. This is the route you can go. Have that out there, you can vet it, you can show it to people. And this is just the design phase of this. This is a quick prototyping. Again, Photoshop scares a lot of people. This is very easy, comes with a lot of tools. Besides that, come on. It's just not cooperating with me.
I have a question.
Sure, why I get it.
Yeah. Have you tried to I mean, benchmark is a bad word, but try to see how long it takes to prototype one here versus InVision? Because I mean, this tool probably not available to me on a Windows machine, so I just go use InVision.
Right, yeah, so this is not available to you on Windows machine, you're right. But there are substitutions out there, and I could probably send you some, because I don't work on any Windows machines at all.
Yeah.
The thing about it is this is just one part of it, right? So InVision fulfills, and that's what I talked about earlier, fulfills that static concept of like, I can get it out there and you can see the look of it. But you're only seeing one screen of that. Remember, I mean, Android, anything nowadays has multiple screens. You have, how do you deal with, or how do you explain gravity or the gravity of elements to somebody in a static comp? You can't do it, right? If you explain that to a client, their heads would explode and they would leave. So you don't, this is one part of it. This is my goal is to try to get developers into design, just like the push is to get designers into development, so that they know how to be better designers. It should go the other way too, where developers are learning a little bit about design. Like I said, you don't have to sit there every day and design something, but you should know a little bit about maybe color theory or a little bit about animation and motion, because these things are important now to apps. It's just, they're gonna become the de facto, you need to have it or your app is gonna fail. And it's an easy, light read for some of this stuff. Other stuff, like I said, the first thing you should have done as far as design is go and read the design specs, right? So yeah, with that said, again, this is one part of it. Once you get that part done, say you get your designs from a designer or anything else like that, let's see if we can get this full screen, then you can move into Framer. The Framer, like I said, it fits the world between actual build and something like InVision, where you could do something where I have a slide transition.
Yeah, more interactive.
But this is more interactive, and that's where I say the high fidelity. So you're talking about something, these are very simple, and these are straight off, I decided instead of making all of my own, you can pull these all off of the Framer.js site. But if you guys, I do have some, but I decided it'd be better so you can go and download that code, it's already hosted. Something like this. Now, it's actually moving very slow on my machine, but you have something where you can build this in less than 100 lines of code. By the way, this is JavaScript, and I'll explain that in a minute. But build this in 100 lines of code, and then show that to a client, show that to your designer, and say, hey, was this what you were thinking? As opposed to taking the design, going it is, but let's say it took you a day. That's a waste of time if they come back and say, yeah, that's completely wrong. I need you to tear that down and rebuild it. That's costing you time, when you probably want to be working on other things thinking about how you're going to hook to your service endpoint, thinking about your performance, thinking about how this is not going to crash and how I'm going to test my app. Some of this might be exciting to you, where I get to, you might like playing or coding animation or motion or interaction in the front end as well as doing all of that other stuff in the back end. But this is something you can do pretty quickly, show it off, and then move on. A little bit about Framer.js, if you don't know, like some of you guys raise your hand, it's actually in CoffeeScript, which compiles down to JavaScript. It's simple to learn. It literally has one page on CoffeeScript. You do have to know a little bit of JavaScript, but given since, Java has the same syntax, the C-style syntax, it should be easy for you to pick up. There's a lot of examples out there, and it's very intuitive as far as creating a class, extensions, especially with CoffeeScript. So some of that syntax or that knowledge will transfer over. It won't be so much of a bump that you can't deal with it. I'll show you guys some more examples just to kind of see how far you can go with this. So this is about 254 lines of code. This actually works better in one of the Chromes, not the ones we're going to like, but I have to show it anyway. So I know this is iOS. Ignore that. But you can see how you can build this out. And seems like this is slide motion, the scrolling motion, but then the click-in events, if it would click in, building these where this is actually dynamic. So obviously the text is not changing, but you guys kind of get the idea of how far you can take this without actually jumping into Studio first, and then again, sending this to a client. If you sent this to a client and they were able to sign off on the interaction, not just the look and feel, but the interaction, the transitions, everything else like that, how easier would that make your job on build? I mean, that would cut that out, right? You wouldn't have to do an iterative build, release it, and then wait, and then have to tear out a whole chunk of your code or a whole view or a fragment that doesn't work or whatever it may be to keep up with their iterations. Here's a more Android-centric example. So let's just refresh this. Simple motions, if it will load. Come on.
Does this also compile to variables?
Yeah, you can have anything you can do in JavaScript or CoffeeScript. It is the complete life. So it might be. Did that just do that while we were talking? It should spin. My computer is definitely low on memory, but if you guys go and download this and compile it at home, you'll see the actual speed. But again, you can see this motion. Say they wanted to come side for side, up and down. You can do this, and you can prototype an entire app this way if you wanted to. And I'm betting, because I'm a betting man, that you can do this in less time than you can actually build a prototype in Android Studio and get that feedback. So let's just close some of these out and show one more. I'm gonna have to do this again because the Chrome is. So you can see this is actually a movie preview playing inside. And you can save these out and send these to clients. So if you wanted to put this on a server, have a client bring it up on their phone, you could do that as well. You don't have to send them a file like this. They don't have to look at it in a browser. They can actually pull it up on their device and see what they're dealing with and play with it. Again, that kind of feedback from a client or your development team or your design director, or even for yourself, if you're developing an app that you're going to put on the Play Store and you have a designer working for you and he sends you a design and you're like, all right, I can do this, prototype it too. This is how I want, this is what I need to change. And you guys can go back and forth through that iterative cycle before you actually build it. Saves you a world of time and headache. And this also squares up. So, whoops, let's not close that out completely. And the last one is just an interaction. So I can go in here, I can type hello, and you can see that come up. So you can build something like these that can actually talk to server. If you wanted to, you could do it. It gives you that flexibility where, again, because it's JavaScript, this is, in a sense, a web app. but close enough to the final, that one-to-one, that you can get away with a lot and learn a lot, again, like I said before, build. And it all depends on how far you want to take it. You want to do an Envision thing, fine. You want to do a full, complete app first this way, and then send it around to, then you can do it. And that's why I like this choice. I like Framer as a choice, because it gives me a choice of what I want to do. Envision, if you wanted to make a really highly interactive, you can't do it. You're stuck. Yeah, exactly. And just wanted to show you guys one more thing, is just that cross, as far as apps go. Let's not save this. So if I wanted to, we have that design I had earlier up. I have to close these. Close that. Let's just bring up Sketch real quick. Guess it doesn't matter. Here we go. My machine is just out of memory because I had so many things open. I mean, it shouldn't be out of memory, but apparently it's chugging here. There we go. So if I want, I can come in here. Let's just get rid of this. And you can see you can import directly from your given application. It should be this is designed for Android. So again, you create that feedback loop between you and your designer. If your designer's working on Photoshop or your designer's working on Sketch, they make an update. There's no graphics you need to cut anymore. There's no high definition. There's no XXX HD you got to worry about, or LD or whatever. You can bring it straight in, start messing with it, and then the same thing goes back to Sketch. Once you're done, there's tools inside Sketch that will output all of that for you, just like there is in Photoshop. But again, you see this feedback loop that you start to create between you and your designer, between you and the client, or you and your art director. It's really quick, and then by the time everybody's settled, everything is signed off, you can just go build. You don't have to worry about it. It's not the perfect solution for everybody, but these talks are starting to happen more so. Again, it started in the web, it's starting to move down to iOS, and now it needs to move into Android with material design. So there's a lot of tools out there, like you mentioned, Envision. There's a couple more that do different things, but again, I found Framer.js to be probably the best of both worlds. And here's the Framer site. Like I said, there's the GitHub. You can go and get it for free if you don't want to pay the $80 for the IDE. You just need to have Node installed on your computer and be a happy terminal command. You know, if you're good in terminal, you're good. And it runs everywhere, so you can go get that. Sketch, unfortunately, is only available for the Mac. But again, you can use Photoshop if you have it already. And I heard that they're working on, at least in the community, that they're working on Illustrator imports for Framer, but we'll see.
I think someone did post, like, just a few days ago, like some very raw version of Illustrator stuff.
Right, yeah. So that is it. Any questions? I know everybody's been asking me. Yeah, it's true. Any questions about this, what I've talked about, anything I missed, anything you would like to know? And I apologize for the I would like to go in more detail, but Kayleen called me in the middle of the week and said, "You still want to give the talk?" And it was like, didn't have too much time to put it together, so. No?
Yeah, prototypes, essentially the mobile web apps.
Doesn't have to be mobile web apps. I showed you that, you saw that it had,
Download the app to see the prototype, right?
no. It's a web application, so as long as they have access to the web or your network, they can view it.
Okay,
So if you want to, like I said, the good thing about it is you can go as far as you want. So if you wanted to literally build that app out there first, you can put a small backend to it, right? Call that information in. You could call it in from Some of the examples that are up there now are from Dribble, are anywhere you want, and then you can build your entire workflow and interaction that, and then send it off to the client and say, you know, don't go using this. This is not production ready, but you know, take a look. You know, let's talk about it. You know, where are the pain points for you? Also, your team can talk about it, and then once that happens, once everything is finalized, you go into actual build. And again, a lot of this, the only disconnect, the downside of this is the fact that, in a sense, it's throwaway code, right? You can't take this code and output it. But you know, as this becomes more problem, what's going to happen, and I think it's happening in the iOS world too, is people start using Framer. What they're going to do is have a compiler that takes the CoffeeScript code and then writes view code for you, and then that part would be done. It'll write the animate. I mean, that's bound. It's going to happen because somebody will be like, I'm tired of, you know, I want to use this, but I'm tired of having to rewrite my code, and so they'll create a plugin that will compile that down for you already into Android. It's just a matter of time. So, anything else? Nope. All right, can I drop my mic?